Heartwarming encounter. Billionaire discovers incredible truth from a poor girl at his son's grave. The air was thick with sorrow as Thomas Carter navigated the familiar gravel paths of Oak Hills Cemetery. He felt the weight of his grief pressing down harder than the expensive suits he wore. A tech mogul in Silicon Valley, he'd spent years building a world of wealth and success, yet here he stood on the cusp of an abyss, staring at the modest headstone that read, Jake Carter, 2006 to 2021. The lavish lifestyle he'd constructed felt utterly meaningless now, a garish contrast to the stillness around him. How could he measure success when he'd lost the one thing that mattered? As he knelt before his son's grave, scattering his tears into the soil, he noticed a flicker of movement nearby. A girl, no more than 12, with wildflowers in her hand. She approached a neighboring grave, her face alight with youthful exuberance despite the somber backdrop. For a moment, he dismissed her, wrapped in his own sorrow, burdened by his assumptions. She was just a poor girl from the housing projects. What could she possibly understand about real loss? But day after day, she returned, leaving wildflowers that danced in the wind. There was a vibrancy to her laughter, a stark contrast to the muffled cries of his own heart. Curiosity piqued, Thomas found himself observing her from a distance, captivated by the way her innocent spirit breathed life into the graveyard. Each wildflower she placed brought whispers of her grandfather, a scrappy veteran whose tales of resilience stirred something dormant in him. Did you know he used to wake up before dawn? She spoke on one visit, her eyes shining bright like the sun filtering through the trees. He worked 3 jobs but always found time to help everyone. It's what he did. Something stirred in Thomas, a tightness in his chest that hurt and healed all at once. Here was this little girl, unaware of the opulence that encased him, yet heavy with knowledge of duty and compassion. Each exchange chipped away at the armor he'd built, revealing a quiet longing for connection and purpose. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As their conversations deepened, Thomas realized how far he had strayed from the dreams Jake had once shared with him, dreams of giving back, of making things better for people like Lily. The tragedy of losing Jake washed over him anew, each wave threatening to drown him. Was his success truly defined by the size of his bank account, or was there something more? Amidst his struggles, a flicker of hope ignited. He could honor Jake's memory by creating something meaningful, community initiatives that uplift those around him while keeping his son's spirit alive. But doubts loomed like shadows. Could a man like him, wrapped in privilege and power, ever truly bridge the chasm of understanding? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows on the graves, he felt the weight of the question hang heavy in the air. Was it already too late to change his path, to connect with Lily and the community he once called home? The answer loomed ahead, a path to transformation, waiting to be uncovered. The next day, Thomas returned to the cemetery with a different sense of purpose. The flowers in his hand weren't just for Jake, they were a symbol of the change he wanted to embrace. Each bloom felt like a promise, a commitment to remember his son not just in sorrow but in action. His mind raced as he approached Jake's grave. Today was going to be different. As he knelt down to lay the flowers, he heard a soft rustle behind him. Lily was there again, her small frame hidden among a flurry of vibrant colors. She was arranging a bouquet of her own, delicate daisies and bright yellow buttercups. There was a joy in her that he couldn't explain, something infectious. He turned to her, curiosity sparking anew. "Hi. Those are beautiful," he said, mustering a smile, unsure of what his voice would sound like today. He had barely managed to speak to anyone since Jake's passing. "Thank you." She beamed, her eyes brightening as she placed a flower on the grave beside him. "I brought these for my grandpa. He used to say wildflowers were the happiest flowers." Thomas felt a knot in his throat. He remembered Jake's infectious laughter, full of life and love. There was a warmth here, mingled with memories of his son, and he wanted to hold that feeling tight. "What was your grandpa's name?" he asked. "Mr. Thompson." She replied proudly. "He taught me to never give up and always help others. He believed that even the smallest person could change the world." In that moment, Thomas felt something unlock inside him. He realized he didn't need flashy donations or grand gestures. He had the power to inspire real change, to uplift the community in the ways that mattered most. "Maybe we could do something together, Lily," Thomas said, surprising himself. "Some kind of event to help others?" Her eyes lit up, vibrant with excitement. "Really? Like a flower planting? We can use all the flowers we can find." "More than that," he replied, already considering possibilities. "We can create a community garden or teach kids about responsibility and love for nature. A way to remember the ones we've lost." Lily's joy felt electric. "I'd love that. We could call it Jake's Garden." The name struck him, piercing through the haze of grief as he realized how much his son would have loved to see something like that flourish. Thomas began to imagine the little hands digging into the earth, planting seeds, the laughter echoing among the blooms, a renewal of life in the wake of loss. But as he looked at Lily's hopeful face, a flicker of doubt crept in. But what if he hesitated, the weight of his past pressing down on him? "What if I mess things up? I've never done anything like this before." "Then we'll figure it out together," she exclaimed, determination etched on her young face. "Everybody makes mistakes. The important part is to try." Her words washed over him, a soothing balm for his fear. He felt a stirring of courage, a glimmer of belief that he could actually do this. Maybe it wasn't too late after all. As they talked about plans and dreams, laughter bubbled up between them, and the shadows of grief felt a little lighter, the air a little more vibrant. Together, they envisioned a future that honored the past, but even as hope blossomed, Thomas couldn't ignore the nagging question: would the community accept him, the billionaire who had turned his back for so long? As the sun began its descent, casting soft shades of orange and pink, he glanced back at Jake's headstone, wondering if he could truly forge a new path amidst the crackling doubts. Was he capable of stepping out of his gilded cage and into the lives of those who needed him? Tomorrow would be the real test of his resolve, and he could feel the clock ticking. Would he embrace the challenge, or would his fears hold him back one last time? The next morning, Thomas woke up with a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety thrumming through him. It was still early, the sun barely kissed the horizon, but he felt restless. Today marked the start of something new, something that could potentially reshape his life and the lives of those around him. He had promised Lily he'd meet her at the cemetery. As he dressed, he rehearsed in his mind how he would approach this community project. Part of him felt fraudulent, a billionaire tethered to the burden of past mistakes, taking advice from a child. But as he stared at his reflection, he could almost hear Jake's laughter, urging him to break free from the chains of grief. As he stepped outside, the morning air was crisp and full of promise. He took a deep breath, the kind that filled his lungs and somehow lifted the weight off his shoulders. Driving to the cemetery felt entirely different this time. Instead of passing by the familiar old buildings and dusty roads of the town without a second thought, he paid attention to the blooming flowers and the chirping birds. Life was vibrant around him, and for the first time in ages, he felt himself awakened to it. Upon arriving, he was taken aback by the sight of Lily standing by the entrance, her small figure vibrating with excitement. She clutched a tattered backpack stuffed with garden supplies. When she spotted him, her face broke into an enormous grin. "Good morning, Mr. Thomas," she exclaimed, bouncing on her toes. "Are you ready to start planting?" "Absolutely," he replied, feeling warmth lighten his burdened heart. "First, we have to make a list of all the things we need," she shouted, whirling around and pulling out papers, glue, seeds, and a pair of tiny garden spades from her bag. Thomas chuckled. Her enthusiasm was infectious. Okay. Let us get to it, he encouraged, and they set off towards Jake's grave. They knelt side by side, comparing seeds and discussing what flowers they wanted in Jake's garden. Lily's ideas flowed rapidly, her imagination sparking visions of a community engaged in joyous labor, laughter spilling as children learned to plant and nurture. Maybe we can have parties there too. Like picnics. She suggested, eager and animated. Picnics sound great, Thomas agreed. A place where families can come together. We should think about getting the schools involved. There's a lot of potential. As the day unfolded, they sketched plans in his notebook filled with doodles and markings representing flowers, insects, and smiling faces. Thomas had not felt so engaged or alive in years, but just as they were working through another idea, the warm air around them shifted. A small group of locals walked past, whispering and exchanging curious glances. Thomas's stomach tightened. They were friends from his past, people from the neighborhood he had long ignored. Would they think he was merely a fool playing at community service? Lily seemed to sense his unease. Don't worry. We'll show them how much fun we're having. She said, her voice brightening the air around them. Taking a breath, Thomas turned to wave, but when they spotted him, the group only turned their heads and continued walking. He felt the sting of rejection wash over him, but right beside him, Lily didn't seem fazed. You'll see, she said with determination, they'll come around. Just keep on trying. He looked down at her, her voice a lifeline. Maybe she was right. If he kept moving forward, with all his flaws and worries, change would come. Yet a gnawing doubt lingered. What if his efforts were met with more disdain than acceptance? As the sun began to set, painting the sky with breathtaking hues, Thomas felt both hopeful and terrified. Could he really become the man this community needed? Would he find redemption where he least expected it? Tomorrow, the planning began in earnest. But would he get the support he needed from those closest to him? And could his shattered past finally mend itself into something beautiful? As the sun dipped lower, bathing the cemetery in warm golds and reds, Thomas felt a spark of energy within him, ignited by Lily's enthusiasm. She busily sketched plans nearby, her small fingers flying across the page, surrounded by the hush of the evening. In that moment, he marveled at her, a bright beacon in a place that felt heavy with sorrow for him. Can we plant sunflowers too? Lily asked, glancing up at Thomas with wide eyes. They make people smile. Sunflowers it is, he replied, smiling back, imagining the garden full of golden blooms, stretching toward the sky like hopeful arms. His thoughts were interrupted by the feeling of being watched. Turning slightly, he saw the same group of locals now standing nearby, appearing more intrigued than before. Their whispering had quieted, some were pointing at Lily's animated gestures, while others shared glances that suggested curiosity, maybe even a hint of recognition. Look, Lily whispered, nudging him with her elbow, they're watching us. Thomas felt his heart race. Could this be the moment of breakthrough he so desperately wanted? Yet, apprehension seeped in. Would they see him just as a wealthy outsider, or could they see the man trying to mend his ways? Taking a deep breath, he decided to lean into the moment. Hey! He called, waving casually. We're starting a community garden here. You're welcome to join us. The group shifted, some exchanging uncertain looks. It wasn't until one of the women, an older lady with kind eyes, stepped forward. Are you serious? You're actually doing this? Yeah, he replied, his voice steadying. In memory of my son, Jake. We want to create a space for everyone to enjoy, to gather, and to remember. That seemed to open the floodgates. One by one, they stepped closer, showing interest that tugged at something deep within Thomas. I remember Jake, one man said, his voice gravelly with nostalgia. He was a good kid. Used to ask me to fish with him at the lake. Lily perked up. You can fish with us someday. If you help us build the garden, then you can come. A chuckle spread through the crowd, breaking the tension. The skepticism began to lift. Thomas felt hope budding within him, raw and fragile but somehow strong at its core. "Kids like Lily remind us how to dream," the woman from before said softly, gesturing toward the sketches spread out across the grass. "You've got a good partner there. We'd love to lend a hand." Just like that, he was no longer an outsider. He felt the tentative threads of connection weaving between him and this community that had once shunned him. Surrounded by the vibrant energy of the flowers and the fading light, they began sharing suggestions, laughter, and plans. Hours later, when the sun had finally surrendered to the horizon and the stars twinkled like tiny diamonds scattered across the sky, Thomas felt lighter. For the first time, he was sharing stories, not just of loss, but of hope. Together, they talked late into the night, laughter punctuating the air, a melody that felt foreign yet inviting, but as Thomas's heart swelled with gratitude, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Would the enthusiasm last? What if tomorrow brought new challenges, the kind that could shake the foundations of the connections he was so tentatively building? As he packed up his things, Lily's laughter bouncing around him like music, and anxiety bubbled beneath his joy, whispering doubts that he fought so hard to silence. Would he be enough for this community? Could a single garden truly heal old wounds? He cast one last glance at the grave, the weight of the moment pulling at him. Tomorrow would be pivotal, a true test of whether he could become the man he hoped to be. As he drove home under the brilliant canopy of stars, one question echoed in his mind: could hope thrive in a life so intertwined with shadow? The morning came quiet and thick, the air heavy with possibility. Thomas awoke with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Today was the day they would start laying the groundwork for the garden. The idea of planting something in the earth felt symbolic, a way to root himself in a place that had once felt so foreign, so void of connection. Lily bounded into the kitchen, her hair tousled and her eyes alight with a gleam that seemed contagious. "Are we ready for the garden?" she chirped, bouncing on her toes. Without hesitation, Thomas smiled, recognizing how her energy empowered him. "Absolutely. Let us get going." After breakfast, they gathered supplies, shovels, seeds, and gardening gloves that he had stored in the garage. Every item he pulled out was a nod to new beginnings. There was a buzz in the air that was almost electric. As they drove back to the cemetery, Thomas felt hope stabbing at his heart, urging him to believe. When they arrived, the group from the previous evening was already assembling near the old oak tree, a lively gathering of familiar faces and friendly smiles. The older woman, who had shown him such kindness the night before, waved energetically. "Good morning," she called out, her face glowing. "We're excited to get started." Thomas parked the car and took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of their welcome wash over him. Each person had brought something: tools, seeds, and even refreshments. "We're ready to turn this place into something beautiful," another man said, lifting his shovel high as if it were a trophy. As they divided into small teams, Thomas joined Lily, who instantly formed a bond with the younger kids present. Their laughter rang out like a happy chorus as they waved sticks, pretending they were magic wands capable of turning the earth into a paradise. "Okay, team," Thomas shouted to grab everyone's attention. "Let us map out where we want to plant the flowers. I want to see sunflowers lining the path right over there." He pointed to a section that caught a soft breeze, a perfect spot to let the tall flowers sway. Lily, with a flourish, drew bubbles and flowers in the dirt with a stick. "We can make it look like a fairy garden," she exclaimed, her face lighting up with creativity. As they worked, conversations flowed easily. They shared their stories, the good and the tough. Thomas listened to their tales of loss, love, and community. It wasn't just him anymore, this was a collective journey, a peaceful rebellion against the shadows that sought to steal their joy. Then, just as a chorus of laughter burst out, a hush swept over the group. Pushing through the grove came a figure Thomas had not anticipated seeing: Greg, a man he had clashed with in the past. His arrival sent an electric chill through the gathering. Greg's brows were knitted together, his face a mix of confusion and uncertainty. "What is going on here?" he questioned, incredulous. Lily stepped forward, fists on her hips. "We're making a garden. A happy place." Her words rang with an innocence that cut through the tension. Greg's gaze softened as he took in the scene, the colorful drawings in the dirt, the animated gestures of Lily, and the cooperative spirit of the grown-ups. But doubt still clouded his features. "You think you can just come back in and take over?" he challenged, crossing his arms. Thomas felt himself tense, emotions brimming close to the surface. This wasn't about territory. This was about healing. Hesitating for a moment, he met Greg's eyes, trying to keep the heat of anger in check. "We're not taking over anything. We're trying to put something positive back into this community. A garden can bring us together." The silence lingered like a dark cloud. Would Greg understand, or would he resist this step toward healing? Thomas's heart pounded, the moment heavy with potential and uncertainty. What if this confrontation pushed them apart instead of together? Would day 2 mark the unraveling rather than the building of what they had begun? As the wind rustled the treetops above, a surge of hope prickled at Thomas's skin. Maybe he could reach Greg. Maybe, today could be another beginning. The air hung thick with tension, wrapping around them like a heavy cloak. Thomas felt the weight of Greg's gaze boring into him. He could practically hear the hearts of everyone present pounding alongside his own, waiting for something to break the stillness. Lily, oblivious to the unspoken conflict, looked up at Greg with wide, trusting eyes. "You can help us," she chimed, her innocence shining in the somber atmosphere. "We're going to grow flowers for everyone." For a fleeting moment, the corner of Greg's mouth twitched, perhaps fighting against the weight of skepticism. Thomas seized the opportunity. "Join us, Greg. We can create something beautiful together, not just for us, but for all those we've lost." He gestured toward the graves, now a canvas for their collective hope. Greg wavered. The tension around him seemed to ebb ever so slightly as he glanced at the children playing, their laughter flowing like a gentle stream. Memories flashed across his face, moments of shared grief, tender and raw. But all too quickly, he shook his head, as if brushing away the ghosts of the past. This was my father's place," he muttered, the anger spilling out alongside pain. "I'm not sure I can just hand it over like that." The group fell silent once more. Thomas knew he had to reach Greg, to break through the hard shell that had formed around him. "We're not trying to take anything from you, Greg. We're trying to heal together. We all have lost something, and it's okay to share that space." The wind shifted, as if urging Greg to consider Thomas's words. A flicker of understanding crossed Greg's face, and for the first time, he seemed to lower his defenses. "Maybe a garden can help," he whispered, almost to himself, lost in thought. Before he could second-guess himself, Lily took a bold step forward, her little hands clasped together. "You can help plant the sunflowers, just like my dad. He always said they reach for the sun. They can grow tall and bring smiles." Greg looked down at her, and slowly, the stern countenance began to soften. The innocence in her plea tugged at something deep inside him, a longing for connection, a desire to reshape past hurt into something warm. Lily's smile was infectious. The older woman stepped closer. "You know, Greg, many of us have lost friends and family here. We come to remember them, and a garden could be a way to keep their memory alive in a beautiful way." There was a pause, a moment suspended in the air filled with the possibilities of new beginnings. The collective hope began to twinkle around them, lighting tiny sparks in their eyes. Greg's shoulders lost some of their stiffness as he took a step forward, clutching a shovel like it was a baton being passed down. "All right," he said, voice steady but softening. "Let us see what we can do." The tentative agreement was met with instant smiles and cheers from the group, as if they had all held their breaths in unison. As they worked together, seeds were planted in the dirt, tangible symbols of the hope growing within their hearts. Thomas felt warmth spread through him. Each shovel of earth felt lighter now, as laughter and shared stories intertwined with sweat and soil. But a part of Thomas remained cautious. Would Greg truly let go of the past? Would he allow himself to embrace the healing? He cast a quick glance at Greg, who was laughing with Lily, their hands muddy, boundaries beginning to blur. And as the day wore on and the sun dipped low in the sky, blanketing everything in warm hues of orange and gold, Thomas couldn't ignore the question lingering in his mind: what would tomorrow bring? As they planted the last line of seeds, the shadows of their past seemed smaller, but the future now that was an entirely different beast. He felt it in the air, a shift was coming, a reckoning of sorts, whispering promises of growth, change, and perhaps even redemption. But deep down, he wondered, would their efforts take root, or would they wither under the weight of what was still unspoken? The next morning, the sun peeked through the trees, casting gentle light onto the newly formed garden. The sweet scent of damp earth mixed with the fresh morning air, creating an atmosphere that felt electric with potential. Thomas was the first to arrive. His heart raced as he surveyed the rows of little sunflowers, their tiny heads turned eagerly towards the sun, as if cheering for the dawn of a new day. His thoughts weighed heavily on last night's triumph. Greg had joined them, and together they had taken steps towards something that felt warm and true. But would today mark the beginning of healing or just another chapter in the story of their struggles? When Greg arrived, Thomas's heart quickened again. He could sense how this was still difficult for him. The shadows of grief clung to Greg, but underneath, there was a fragile light emerging. Greg stretched out his hands, letting the daylight illuminate the wrinkles etched by sorrow. "Did you see how they turned toward the sun?" Greg said softly, a hint of awe in his voice. "I never thought about it like that, reaching for the light." "Yes," Thomas replied, feeling a flicker of hope spark between them. "They remind us that growth can happen even after the darkest moments." It felt significant, sharing this thought with Greg, who stood there as a man torn between his past and the possibilities ahead. Suddenly, Lily arrived with a small group of children trailing behind her. Their bright laughter echoed, slicing through the heavy air and filling the space with a sense of joy. They were full of life and hope, the very ingredients necessary to nurture the garden. "Can we start planting more flowers?" she asked, bouncing on her toes, her enthusiasm contagious. "I want to grow an entire rainbow." As the children descended onto the plot filled with rows of sunflowers, it was a sight to make anyone's heart swell. Together, they worked tirelessly, digging little holes and carefully placing more seeds into the rich soil. It felt like magic was weaving around them, binding their hearts to the earth, each seed a promise of renewal. Thomas watched Greg as he got down on his knees beside Lily. She handed him the seeds with careful precision, as if she were entrusting him with a treasure. Greg's frown relaxed as laughter spilled from his lips, melding with the sounds of the children. It was a different man than the one who had walked into the cemetery yesterday, filled with resistance and sorrow. "You know," Greg said, catching Thomas's eye, "maybe I could bring some of my father's old tools next time. I think he'd have loved this." That simple admission struck a chord within Thomas. It held a wealth of emotional significance, the tentative step towards reclaiming not just the land, but his memories of his father that had long been shrouded in grief. Gradually, as the sun climbed higher, the garden flourished under the care of these diverse hands, young and old alike, each sharing in the labor of love. It was a community effort forged in shared pain and growing hope, and it transformed into something pure. But as the day unfolded, Thomas noticed Greg occasionally glance toward the older graves, lines etched across his face reflecting the inner turmoil. Every time he diverted his eyes, it seemed he wrestled with something much more serious beneath the surface. As they established the last row of sunflowers, Thomas felt a stirring inside him. The shift was palpable, and he could almost taste the air thick with potential. Could today be the day that truths would finally surface? Would Greg confront the ghosts that lingered silently in the background, waiting? As the children cheered, raising handfuls of soil, Thomas's heart beat fast with anticipation. Just then, Greg turned to him, his expression a mix of vulnerability and determination. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, voice steady but shaking with urgency. "Something about my father that I've never shared." In that instant, the joy woven through the garden stood still, replaced by a sense of impending revelation. What would Greg share? Would it bring them closer or unravel the fragile bond they had begun to build? Greg's brow furrowed as he took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. The laughter of the children faded into a distant hum, and for a brief second, it felt like they were the only two souls in the world. Thomas leaned in slightly, heart pounding as he nudged Greg to continue. My father, he wasn't just a good man, Greg started, voice barely above a whisper. He had secrets. Things he hid even from me. A shadow passed over his face, darkening his blue eyes. Things that pushed him away from the family. I didn't understand it back then, but now. Thomas watched as the walls Greg had built over the years slowly began to erode, piece by painful piece. Could this be what Greg needed to truly heal? It was a leap into the unknown, both exhilarating and terrifying, a glimpse into the heart of a man still wrestling with loss and betrayal. He wasn't just a father to me, Greg continued, each word a struggle. He was also a person, flawed and complex. I didn't find out until after, well, you know. He was involved in something illegal, something he thought was for our future, but it cost him his life. The words hung in the air between them, a heavy confession that seemed to echo among the flowers and trees. Thomas felt both the weight of that truth and a surge of sympathy toward Greg. That must have been so hard for you to carry alone, he finally replied, his voice steady, wanting Greg to feel seen, heard, embraced. Greg nodded, shame blooming across his cheeks. I always wanted to honor him, but after his death, all I felt was shame. I was lost. I kept thinking, what kind of legacy is that? I didn't even know how to mourn him, how to remember the good without the bad shadowing over it. Thomas's heart ached at Greg's pain. Your father made mistakes, yes. But those mistakes don't define you. You have the power to transform that legacy, to build something with it. His words felt true, an invitation to see the bigger picture, one full of growth and potential. Just then, Lily approached, her hands cupped around something small and dirt-stained. She looked up heartily, her innocence shining through like the morning sun. Look what I found! She exclaimed, revealing a tiny earthworm wriggling in her palm. It's a soil helper. We should keep him safe. Greg's expression softened at the sight of her, and for a moment, the weight on his shoulders seemed lighter. Watching her witness life through such hopeful eyes stirred a flicker of understanding within him. Maybe I need a soil helper too, he admitted, a smile creeping across his face, even if it felt bittersweet. Exactly. Thomas said, feeling a surge of warmth. Sometimes we all need help to dig through the darkness. In the midst of their conversation, they noticed that the young ones were now starting to play a game, laughter exploding all around them. Children running and chasing each other, their joy infectious, illuminated the garden in ways the sun's rays never could. It was as if their laughter was stitching the fabric of their community tighter, each giggle a stitch of healing, but even amidst this joy, Thomas couldn't shake the thought of what awaited Greg. Would he fully embrace this shift and take steps toward forgiveness for himself and his father's memory? The seeds they planted today, would they flourish with understanding and resilience, or become lost in the weeds of past hurts? The stillness in the air now felt thick with answers waiting to be uncovered. Greg, Thomas's voice was soft, almost hesitant. Are you ready to take a step forward? To finally face what was left unsaid with your father? Greg's eyes met Thomas's, his heart racing with the weight of what lay ahead. The moment was charged, hanging on a thread, and Thomas could almost hear the pulse of possibility in the garden around them. As the reality of the question settled, Greg hesitated. Could he uncover the truth that might finally lead him to peace? The children were lost in their laughter, but for Greg and Thomas, the seeds of a new beginning dangled at the precipice of an important decision. What would it take for Greg to find closure? In that moment, every breath felt like a whisper of change, and everything hung in the balance. What lay ahead was a journey yet to be taken, and a truth waiting to be revealed on the horizon. Greg's heartbeat drummed in his ears, drowning out the giggles and shouts of the children playing. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, like invisible chains binding his thoughts. Could he really face the past? Could he even dare to hope for forgiveness not just for his father but for himself? Thomas remained steady, his deep brown eyes locked on Greg, offering a lifeline of understanding. "You don't have to do it alone," he whispered, as if afraid to break the delicate spell that lay between them. "I just don't know how to begin." Greg admitted, his voice a mix of despair and longing. The very thought of revisiting old memories, of parsing through anger, hurt, and confusion, felt insurmountable. "You start small, one step at a time," Thomas encouraged. "What if you began by writing a letter? No one has to see it but you. Just pour out everything you feel. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be honest." A flicker of hope ignited in Greg's chest. Writing a letter felt manageable, like a small seed he could plant without demanding too much of himself. "I could try that," he murmured, feeling the first stirrings of release. Lily, oblivious to the weightier matters surrounding her, bounded back over to them, her face glowing. "Can we name the worm?" she pleaded, holding it up earnestly. "He should have a name since he is part of our garden now." Greg chuckled lightly, the tension in his chest easing at her unfiltered joy. "What do you think we should name him, Lily?" "Wiggles," she declared triumphantly, her grin broadening. "That suits him," Thomas agreed, laughter breaking through the heaviness. The simple joy of a child, combined with the innocence of a little worm, felt like a reminder that life could start anew, even in the smallest ways. As Lily returned to the other kids, Greg's gaze drifted back to Thomas. "Seeing her makes me think, maybe there's still time to introduce some light after everything." "Absolutely," Thomas nodded, hope dancing in his eyes. "You're not defined by your father's choices. You get to write your own story now." But as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting golden hues around the garden, a different shadow lingered. Unraveling Greg's story also meant wrestling with painful truths. The idea of writing to his father felt daunting, like standing at the edge of a cliff. Would he leap into the unknown, or back away, paralyzed by fear? "Let us do it together," Thomas proposed, sensing Greg's hesitance. "You write, and I'll be right here. I won't rush you or pressure you. Just take your time." The gesture wrapped around Greg like a warm embrace, a shield against his swirling doubts. He closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of the moment. "Okay," he finally breathed. "I'll take that step." Just then, the laughter of the children crescendoed around them, spilling over into a melody of joy that felt contagious. The sun's golden rays dimmed, but the atmosphere remained vibrant with hope. For the first time in a long while, Greg felt the stirring of possibility. He looked toward the laughter, envisioning all the moments yet to come, both painful and beautiful, but as he stepped closer to the edge of his past, he couldn't shake the doubts flitting through his mind. Would confronting his father's truth bring the peace he sought, or would it open old wounds too deep to heal? In that fleeting moment of clarity, Greg realized the path ahead was more uncertain than he ever anticipated. And deep in his heart, the question loomed, could a letter truly bridge the chasm of regret and grief that had long divided him from his father? With choices surrounding him, the garden pulsed with life, but the journey toward healing was just beginning. Would he find the courage to dive into the depths of his past? Greg sat silently in the garden the next day, surrounded by a joyful swirl of kids planting flowers and giggling as they played with soil. Yet, despite the laughter echoing around him, a heavy blanket of uncertainty rested on his shoulders. He had mentioned the thought of writing a letter to his father, but the prospect of actually pouring out his heart scared him. Deep down, he felt an internal battle raging. The need to confront his past clashed with the desire to keep it buried. Thomas approached with a cup of lemonade, the sweet, tangy scent wafting around them. "Hey, how are things going?" Many children were gathering around like bees to a flower, curious and eager to dig into the work. "I'm all right," Greg said, forcing a smile, his heart still heavy. "Just thinking." "About your letter?" Thomas asked, empathy shining in his warm eyes. "I keep trying to think of the right words," Greg admitted, licking his dry lips. "How can I say what I feel?" I don't even know where to start. Thomas squeezed his shoulder gently. You don't have to write a masterpiece. It's just for you. Just let it flow, he encouraged. Gathering his thoughts, Greg glanced at the children. Lily, laughter splashing through the air, her smile radiating innocence. That thought, of creating something beautiful out of hurt, resonated within him. He took a deep breath. Could he truly transform his pain into purpose? Okay, Greg finally murmured, determination creeping into his voice. I will. Can you be there with me? The vulnerability in his request hung in the air. Of course, Thomas replied softly. Let us do it together. Finding a quiet corner of the garden, Thomas sat beside Greg on the grass, watching the sun cast its golden rays across the petals of flowers hugging the ground. He could feel Greg's apprehension quivering in the air, but this time, hope hung on the breeze as well. All right, it's time, Thomas said firmly but gently. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Greg nodded, pulling a small piece of paper from his pocket. As he focused, the world around him faded away, their surroundings turning into a distant hum. I miss you, Dad, Greg began, the words tumbling from his soul. I miss your laughter. I've carried the weight of your mistakes, but you were still my father. I wish I could have known you better. His voice trembled as he dug deeper into the memories. He wrote about the times they shared fishing, the lessons he didn't grasp until later, how he felt both anger and love battling within him. As each word left his pen, it felt as though he was releasing pieces of his grief, lightening the burden on his heart. Thomas offered quiet encouragement, every so often glancing at Greg, who had become absorbed in his cathartic release. Greg continued, his voice a whisper. I don't want to dwell on the past anymore. I want to forgive you and myself. I hope you can forgive me for the things I never understood. Tears pricked at the corners of Greg's eyes. The sun hung high, illuminating the raw vulnerability of this moment. As he wrote, he could almost feel some of the darkness lifting, crushed under the weight of honesty and acceptance. I want to change, Greg wrote passionately, laying bare his heart. If I could plant seeds of hope in your name, I would. I want the garden to mean something, to bring healing to those who wander by. He paused, letting that thought settle deep within him. The beauty of their community and the smiles of children brought him joy. He was learning to embrace the love that he had misunderstood for so long. What if we read it out loud? Thomas suggested softly, sensing the openness that lingered in the air. Taking a deep breath, Greg nodded. The trembling in his heart mixed with excitement and wild nerves. As they stood side by side, with the kids busy at play and the garden surrounding them buzzing with vibrant life, Greg read his words aloud, each syllable echoing under the canopy of the bright sky. When he finished, silence stretched between them. The truth revealed itself softly like a new dawn. I know it's not easy, Thomas said, pride glowing in his eyes. But you've taken a bold step forward, my friend. Just then, Lily and the other children came bounding over, eyes bright as they called out for help with their planting. The energy blossomed around them like the flowers they nurtured, wild, free, and beautiful. Greg marveled at how hopeful he felt in this moment. I think I understand, healing doesn't have to be a solitary journey. It can happen through love, shared laughter, and community. Thomas smiled, placing a hand on Greg's shoulder. In that instant, they both let hope settle in, the way sunflowers stretched themselves towards the sun. Days flowed together as they continued their work, laughter interweaving with the tasks they took on. Greg found himself returning to the cemetery, bringing his father's old tools and more letters to share. There was now purpose not only for him but for the future of his community. The garden began to flourish, colors popping up under the hues of returning sun, an emblem of all that could grow from grief and new beginnings. Lily often grinned beside Greg, her joy contagious, as she whispered, just like Dad taught us, a little love goes a long way. One afternoon, as they all sat under the broad oak tree, sharing snacks and stories, Greg felt warmth bloom in his chest. Through the laughter, new friendships were born, revealing the power of their shared journey. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow, he looked around at the faces bright, filled with dreams of something beautiful. Greg finally understood the past didn't have to dictate who he was becoming. It could be a piece of him, yes, but it didn't have to hold him back. Tomorrow, he thought, would be filled with even more promise. They would continue to cultivate not just flowers, but a deeper sense of community. There was still so much growth to nurture, and as he closed his eyes, a sense of lightness enveloped him. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could thrive together in this garden of hope. The night faded gently, promising new beginnings, with echoes of laughter cradling the sky above them. And as the stars shimmered down, the garden pulsed with life, each flower a testament to resilience, love, and the power of healing that intertwines the fabric of a community. Remember, dear friends, to never underestimate the seeds of hope that we plant in each other's hearts. If you found inspiration in this story, this is your moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, because every like makes a difference. Comment below your reactions and feelings about the ending. We want to hear from you. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. True fans understand how important it is to spread the love.